Hi there. So I'm going to set up my Raspberry Pi as a web server. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my Raspberry Pi. I'm using a 3A Plus with half a gig of RAM and a quad-core processor. I'm just going to throw it into my laptop using a USB dongle, and you should see it appear. And there we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is run Raspberry Pi. So Raspberry Pi Imager. Try that again. Raspberry Pi Imager. And yes, I want to give it admin permissions. Get rid of that one because I'm going to write over it. And we're just going to write the OS. So I'm going to choose Raspberry Pi OS Lite because this is a web server and it is something that I want to SSH into rather than do in real time via a desktop. I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to select Raspberry Pi OS Lite 64-bit, which I find is the most stable. I'm going to select my storage and I'm going to click on this little cog icon, which brings up some references. So I'm going to give this a host name, which is how we'll be logging into it, and I'm going to call this Server Pi. I've enabled SSH with authentication. I've given it a username and a password. I configured my Wi-Fi and set some location settings, and that's about it. So I'm going to click on Save, and then I'm going to click on Write, and we're going to click on Yes to continue. So we're going to give it a few moments to actually sit here and write to our Raspberry Pi SD card. It does take a moment for it to pick up the information. If anyone has any questions while they want to talk to me and I'm doing this, please feel free. Don't really have anyone in the room right now, so there probably is no one to ask questions anyway, so it doesn't matter. Oh wait, no, I tell a lie, I have a massive one person. There we go, so now we've got the write. As the write process goes up, we have insert disk. I just cancel this, and we just wait for it to write to the card. This takes about a minute or two, and so I just had someone asking what I'm doing. I'm turning a Raspberry Pi, not the Pico, the Raspberry Pi 3A Plus into a web server. This is basically a live interactive tutorial. So if anyone has any questions while I'm doing this, please feel free, because there will be moments when I'm waiting for things to update and that kind of stuff. So you're basically getting a real-time explanation of setting up a Raspberry Pi as a development server for HTML projects, PHP, and that kind of thing. Though for this session it will be limited to Apache. So we're just writing a card now. So this is currently writing Raspberry Pi OS Lite. This is the CLI version rather than the desktop version. So everything we'll be doing will be at a terminal level. The reason being is that it's half megabyte. No? Yes, sorry, it is a half gigabyte device. I'm getting my megabytes and my gigabytes confused there. So it's 512 megabytes of RAM is what I'm trying to say. And it's a quad-core processor. It gets a little bit slow if you're on a desktop environment. So my preferred way of running this particular Raspberry Pi is to run it at CLI. So that basically means we use SSH to log into it and we do everything via the terminal. Recently, I've started doing this for a lot of my AI projects. So I usually install Python on one of these things, set up the environment, and then I'll use Nano or something to write my Python, and then I'll run it using Python CLI. And I found it's a pretty good way of doing things. Especially as many of these devices require their own unique setups and things can conflict. I mean, you can use Conda, you can use Docker, and you can use other things as well, but I tend to save that for deployment. When I'm just tinkering with projects, I tend to just grab one of my mini Raspberry Pis lying around, I install the software environment I want, and I just try and code it on a relatively clean operating system. But as I say, right now I'm just focusing on getting Apache set up on this so we can serve a web page, do some web development, and then in following up videos I'll do some more interesting things with it. But this is basically the initial setup of the Raspberry Pi as well. So the installing of the operating system, the installing of Apache, the building of a simple website just to demonstrate it works, and accessing it on your local network. This video will of course go up on YouTube, so anyone who wants to visit my YouTube channel, which is also at CK Enthusiast, will be able to see this video from beginning to end, and of course you'll be able to skip all the boring bits while I ramble on as it tries to right itself in various stages. And again, if anyone has any questions while I'm sitting here waiting for a card to write, please feel free to do so. I'm here to answer anything you want. Which is probably a very dangerous thing to say on the internet. But, as I say, we're now 5% away from the card being written, and I shall now be springing into action. And we're at 99%. It will now, of course, make us wait on the 99%, and it will now verify. I've completely forgot it verifies the card. You can cancel verify, but it's nice to know the image is written. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure it has been, so I'm just going to cancel verify there, and it will just go to finalizing. And now the operating system, well, not the operating system, but the operating system files will appear as they did. And now what I've got to do is grab my little Raspberry Pi, which you can't see right now because my camera isn't set up, but I'll describe what I'm doing. I'm basically taking my Raspberry Pi computer, I'm removing the flash drive, and I'm sticking it into the SD card slot. Now I'm just going to grab my USB cable, and I'm going to plug it into my adapter, plug in the Raspberry Pi, and then I'm going to give it about a minute or so to boot up, because it will do several things. And because this is a headerless install, which means there's no graphical interface, it will basically expand the file system. So it's just written a very temporary file system to the card right now. It will expand that to the full size of the card, which takes a minute or two. And then it will boot directly into the Raspberry Pi. Because I've gone into settings here and I've set up a host name address, I've set up SSH, I've set up my Wi-Fi details. It basically means that even though I don't have direct access to it via a keyboard and mouse, I can just SSH directly into it over the network, and I can do my magic that way, which again is my preferred way of dealing with these little Pis, to be honest. I have Raspberry Pi Zeros, I have Raspberry Pi 3A Pluses, and it tends to be the Raspberry Pi 4s that get powerful enough to run a desktop. And actually, to be fair, this will run a desktop quite happily. The biggest limiting factor is, in fact, the amount of RAM you have, which is only half a gig. Whereas if you had a Raspberry Pi B+, you would have about 1 or 2 gig of RAM, which is much more usable for a desktop operating system. Of course, if you're on a Raspberry Pi 4, then you'll have between 1 and 4 or even 8 gigs of RAM if you want to spend that much money. And that's now a desktop computer. But for these little devices, I very much got used to using terminals and that kind of thing. So I'm watching the flashing light on the Raspberry Pi to give me some indication of when it might be finished, because that gives me an indication of if it's still writing to the disk or not. I say disk, but it's actually an SD card. But while I'm doing that, I can actually jump into the command prompt, and I'm just going to see if it's available yet. Probably isn't, but we'll try it anyway. So SSH, my username, and I called this server pi, if I remember correctly, serverpi.local, and we're going to see, there we go. So now it's asking for a fingerprint. This is basically so we know that a device hasn't been swapped on us, because someone else could occupy serverpi.local and then pretend to be this device, but by having this fingerprint remembered, it means that no one can swap anything out. I'll type in my password as well. And there we go, we now have access to the command prompt. And now everything else here is fairly simple. So I'm going to clear just to reset the display. And we're going to do an update first. So this will update the software of the Raspberry Pi. So we do sudo, which is super user do. Basically elevates the permissions to say you can access and adjust all the system files. You should only run this command if you're very sure of what you're doing and you're changing system files intentionally. Otherwise, you should just run applications normally with their normal permissions. So super user apt update. I'm going to type in -y. Don't necessarily need that, but I'm going to also type in double @ because I can combine commands this way. Sudo apt upgrade. I'm going to go -y as well. This basically prevents a prompt coming up and saying, do you want to install it? It will take this much space. I've pre-answered the question by going, yes, I do. So now I can just press enter and the entire operating system will update. So this is basically the Raspberry Pi equivalent of Windows Update, only with the difference that it doesn't give you annoying pop-ups all the time and force you to restart at 2 o'clock in the morning, losing whatever data you left there when you wandered off from your computer last time, which, has never happened to anyone, I'm sure. Yes, this is basically a Raspberry Pi update. As you can see, it's grabbing all the packages. It's now installing the software, or downloading them ready to install, I should say. This is a quad-core processor, so it shouldn't take too long. I think the biggest bottleneck, to be honest, is the speed of the SD card, which isn't a particularly high-quality one. But you can see all the different files it's updating. So we've got the EEPROM being updated. We've got Python 3 is already installed. You've got OpenSSL on there. So it's a good opportunity to just scan through the list and see what's being updated, really, and give you an idea of what's actually available. So we're now unpacking things. So it's downloaded everything it wants to download. And with these windows, you can actually scroll up and down if you want to go through the list at your own your own pace. So following packages will be upgraded. It actually gives you a list of all the packages here. So we've got a lot of firmware upgrades. And we got Streamer plugin. Not quite sure what that one is. I think it's to do with the display, but not 100% sure. SSL, that's going to be to do with the SSH we're doing. Do you reckon you could do, what do you reckon you could do with a VPS under 1 gig of RAM? I actually run a VPS with under 1 gig of RAM. No, I tell a lie, it's got 1 gig of RAM exactly. And what I use it for is an AI interface. So I've used Python to run a Flask interface. And that then allows me to create an API, which then allows me from a web browser or web system to submit a ChatGPT request via the OpenAI API. And basically, it just takes my request, it forwards it through, and I can just write ChatGPT apps to my heart's content. It could also be a mail server. I've done that before. I've run Moodle on it more than one occasion, just when I want to test something or adjust something. I've run WordPress websites. I've done Apache, as I'm doing now. I've developed Python apps. So you can do quite a lot with a VPS. I think I have 3 or 4 spun up right now with various different projects, which I create for my company, basically. I work in education, so we're developing courseware, and one of the things we're developing for teachers is an AI assistant, so they can ask questions about our courseware rather than having to phone us up and email us and all that kind of thing. And it's turning out to be pretty effective, and people are enjoying it. So I'm developing that on a lot of my VPSs right now. Right, so now we've got the update. Actually, installing the web server is pretty simple. It's just sudo apt install, and then Apache, there we go, Apache2, and that will then install the required stuff. My friend told me he couldn't do much with it. Yes. Oh, you can do a lot with a Linux operating system, and there we go, let's grab this one. A Linux operating system and 1 gigabyte of RAM, especially if you take away the desktop. Now, you see, this is why I used the minus or -y earlier, so I didn't have to say yes to everything. I said, I've given you a command, just execute it for me. So I'm just moving things around on my desktop while we're talking. So what's it saying? What's he going to do with the web server? This is purely for development. I do a lot of work with Bootstrap 5. and I do PHP work and database work and all that kind of thing. And I just like nice, clean SD cards with these installed, so I can just swap it in there, SSH, and just try things out, to be honest. The whole point of the Raspberry Pi is it's there so I can break it. And I can learn things by breaking it without actually affecting my production server. So Apache is installed. Now, I think there's one or two things I have to do. I'm just going to double check my notes. And I've got some instructions here. Let's scroll down. I actually do plan to AI my various notes and things, because I do keep forgetting to do things. Right, I've installed Apache. Yeah. Okay, so right, if you ever want to find out your IP address, just type in hostname -live. Now you'll notice that I'm just grabbing it from my instructions, and I'm just right-clicking to paste it in, and this will actually list your my mind's going blank, your IP address. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do, is there? No, that should be it, if I remember correctly. Oh, there's some permissions I can change as well. But we're going to test to see if the Pi works right now, if it's serving up anything. So if I go local, nope, it's server pi.local. And we'll see if anything appears. There we go. So we got our Apache2 test domain. Now we'll need to be able to write to the folder and things like that. I've never used Django. I've heard of it a lot. I'm using Flask right now because I'm mostly writing APIs, to be honest. I also use Streamlit for AI work, but I don't do that quite so often as just using Flask, to be honest. Yeah, so I do need to adjust the data, I think, so let me double check my instructions. To be able to make changes within the files within var without using root permissions, you need to set up some root permissions. I have root permissions, so it's not actually an issue for me. So if I go cd var www and html, that's my directory there. Now I can just go into nano. Actually, I'm going to rename index.html to index.old.html. And yes. Permission denied. Okay, so I do need to set up permissions. Okay, let's do this properly, shall we? And let's type this in. So this is my usermod command. The username I'm actually using is DC Foreman. And I'll crown it. And now I should be able to run that. Oh, no. Oh, I'm doing rem. I'm trying to remove a folder because I've gotten my commands mixed up. Hang on a sec. My what do web developer name his son? Jason. I'll just CP it. I can't be bothered to remember the right command. So HTML to index.old.html. Okay, so I haven't got my permission set up. I have actually forgotten how to do this. So why did that not get set up? I probably need to set 777 permissions on it. So I have to remember. I have to remind myself on how to do all this. It's been a while since I've done this, I'm afraid. If anyone remembers the command, please feel free to put it into chat. It's just giving myself permission to write through the directory, which I believe is just, yeah. Firstly, we added our user Pi, yeah. Default group to Apache. Secondly, we give ownership to the files and folders. Oh, you know what? I'm being a prat, aren't I? I can just sudo it. cp index.html, index.old.html. There we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've been using Windows too long. So now if I ls, I have now made a copy of that. So sorry that took me so long to remember. So sudo nano index.html. And there we go. So I'm just going to wipe all this out. We don't need all this. Could probably just delete the file and start again. Hello, how's it going, KE? And just completely destroying. Oh, it didn't actually destroy everything. Okay. You know what? I will do what I was going to do in the first place. So exit. Yeah, sure. rm sudo rm index.html. There we go. That's what I should have done in the first place. I'm just being stupid. Nano index.html. There we go. So we're going to go doc type HTML. We'll go HTML lang equals en. And we'll throw in head and title, a website, and close that down. Only it's title, not HTML, and head and body and h1 hello world h1 and then paragraph. This is a newly minted server, and we'll close the tag, and we'll close body, and we'll close HTML, and we'll Control O to write the file and Control X to save the file. Now with list we got 2 folders, so we'll grab this and we reload it. And now we got our new update. So basically we can log in at any time. I like to use WinSCP when I'm logging into these things because I can use my SSH credentials to do that. I want to do this, but Raspberry Pis is so inaccessible and expensive. Actually, not true. They're not bad now. rpilocator.com. If you head over here, you'll get to see all the Raspberry Pis that are available. As you can see, there's quite a few of them now. They are very much back in stock, so they're not being pirated anymore. Not pirated, whatever you call it, scalped. That's the word. So if I go to my region, which of course is the United Kingdom, I can see all the ones that are listed. So we got, this is the model I'm using, Raspberry Pi 3A Plus, 512 megabytes of RAM. It's £28.50. Or you can grab one which is a Raspberry Pi 0W, which is 15 quid. You can get that from Pimeroni as well. Or you can get the one with headers for another £1.16. So yeah, they're quite available again. And of course, if you want a Raspberry Pi 4, they're now coming in at £44.88. This one is offering it for a few pennies less. You got a 4 gig one for £54. And you got the 8 gigs back in stock for £75. And again, they're all on Pi Hut and Pimeroni. So I'm just going to click on this and we'll see the official thing. No, I mean, this is the official pricing. So this is no longer scalped pricing. These are the prices they're going to be going forward. The only thing I wish is that the Raspberry Pi 2Ws were coming out, because the Raspberry Pi 2Ws are basically the equivalent of these Raspberry Pi 3A Pluses, but they're a smaller footprint, so they're going to be that size rather than, I'll find the other one, rather than this size. Now, to be fair, it's smaller than the average Raspberry Pi, and there's no reason, unless you're making wearables, not to have this form factor. It has advantages, I find. It's got a full-size USB port. It's got a full-size HDMI. And one of the things I do hate about these, actually this one's not so bad, because this is the micro HDMI. The HDMIs I really don't like, to be honest, are the ones that come with the Raspberry Pi 4. And that's those micro mini HDMI, sort of these things. Actually, no, that's the USB 4. Where is it? Where's the port? Am I being? Oh no, it's got 2 of them. I'm being an idiot again. So yeah, it's got these 2 micro or mini. I think it's micro. Micro is the smallest one. Mini is a slightly bigger one. But I find these cables break, and if you're not careful with them, But yeah, you can definitely grab a Raspberry Pi. They're within price range again, and there's plenty of them to be had. So now's a really good time to go and grab a few. Sorry, that's so cool. Can I write my server using Golang with Raspberry Pi? That's a good question. I don't know if you can use Golang with a Raspberry Pi, mostly because I'm not a Golang developer. But if I look up some instructions very quickly, using the Go compiler on a Raspberry Pi. So yes, there is a tutorial for it. So Go, commonly referred to as Golang, program language designed to help deal with programming for multiple cores and networked machines. It's similar to Python and JavaScript when it comes to code and readability and usability. So yeah, I'm obviously not a Go expert, so I don't know much about it. I'm very much in the realms of PHP, Node.js, Python, more the traditional languages. But yes, you definitely can use it, and there are definitely tutorials for it. You're welcome. And that's about it, really. Do you have any resources for students? If you want a resource for students, this isn't Raspberry Pi specific, but if you hop over to Amazon, actually, you know what? If you pop over to my website, foremanlearning.com, you'll see that I have a number of books here. Well, I would say programming books, but they're basically web developing books. But if you want to learn Python, then I've written a book for Python 3.10, which is the version that tends to be used on Raspberry Pi. Or is it 9? I think it comes with 9, but you can upgrade it to 10 if you want to. But yeah, if you want to learn Python programming, I've written a book for it. I will be writing books in the future for Raspberry Pis. Now they're back available, but it'll take me a couple of months to get that done. In the meantime, anyone who's interested in building a website, there's also a free ebook here. Download a business website for free. It will give you a Bootstrap 5 template. It will then teach you how to modify it, how to buy hosting, all that good stuff. So, like I say, completely free. And if you've got any kids who you want to teach technology to, I've got Kids Learn the Internet and Kids Learn Science and Invention. Everything else is really web development stuff. Though I do have a fun book here I threw together, which is a grand tour of programming, 50 languages, 100 programs. So basically, I went through and I created 50 programs in 50 different languages. I used various online interpreters to do this. The programs are repeated. They're Hello World, and they are a random number guessing game. The reason I chose those is because you've got logic in the random number guessing game. You've got the ability to output text to the prompt. It really is the very minimum you need to know to produce any kind of useful program. So you know how to set up variables, you know how to bring those variables into a decision-making process, how to generate random numbers, how to get a response, which is a question saying, would you like to... enter a number. So it's asking for direct input, and then it's processing that input, and it's putting itself into a loop, so it'll repeat it a certain number of times until you win. So it's loops, variables, data, logic, basically all the stuff you need to do it. And again, the reason I created this book is because I asked myself the question, there's all these different languages out there. What are they like? So I went off and I spent a year actually researching and making these things in different languages. And then I generated a chapter at the end of it, which organizes the size of the program. So you can actually see which language managed to get the smallest program for, what was it called? The smallest program for the random number guessing game, and of course which was the longest program, which funny enough, spoiler, assembly was the longest program when you're making something like that, and it was quite surprising what the shortest program was, to be honest. It's only a few lines. But yeah, if anyone's interested in just flicking through casually, seeing the different syntaxes, comparing the languages to one another, then A Grand Tour of Programming is just a fun book that I wrote for myself more than anything else, and I decided to publish. So enough rambling about that one. I didn't actually mean this to turn into a sales pitch. But yeah, so if you're looking for any programming resources, then please feel free to go to foremanlearning.com. All these books are available, and they're half the price of any competitors. I don't see why you should be paying £30 for any programming book. So I think the highest price I have is £20 for this one, which teaches you HTML5 and Bootstrap. Then the kids ones, I think they're about $5.99 each, and the rest of them are about the £14 mark. And that's for the printed version. If you want to go for the digital versions, they're even cheaper than that. All of my ebooks are under $9.99. I think some are as low as $5.99. So yeah, you can just download them that way as well, and they're just all on Amazon. So if you don't like the book, you can get a refund as well. So yeah, anyway, with that little plug out the way, which turned out not to be so little, I have essentially made it. So we'll review the commands that I used. And this is one of the reasons I like Linux, is you can just cycle through the commands. So I began with clear. We did a sudo at update -y, sudo at upgrade -y, and just use the at symbol to combine those commands together. We then installed Apache2. I then listed the IP address using a host name, but because we set a .local, I don't really need that. This is the directory where your HTML is located. Then I went on a bit of a random thing. Now, this was actually correct. No, it wasn't. I was supposed to copy that one. Now, I did use this user mod, which didn't work. I have to remember why that's not working. I did try to crown it. That didn't work either. Then I remembered I can actually use sudo. So I just used sudo, which would have been here. There we go. So that's when I realized I could use sudo because I was being an idiot. Copied over the original index file. Then I just used nano to edit the index file and remove the old one. Yeah, it's basically the whole journey so far. So anyway, I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will be uploading this video in its entirety on my YouTube channel. So please feel free to head over to www.youtube.com/@ckenthusiast. The video will be up in about half an hour or so, or even 10 minutes if I do it quickly. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments there. If you have any requests for what you would like to see this server do, again, please post your suggestions in the comments. And other than that, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for jumping on with me this afternoon, and I hope to see you all again soon. So thank you again for popping by.